Think about the world today for a second. There is one supernation sitting at the absolute center of global commerce, military dominance, and pop culture. Whether you're looking at tech giants, movie studios, or aircraft carriers, the United States holds an empire-like grip on modern reality. But here's the thing, it wasn't always this giant. Go back just a few centuries, and this vast continent was an entirely different world, populated by hundreds of sophisticated, diverse indigenous nations who had built complex political alliances, trade networks, and vibrant cultures over thousands of years. Then came the late 1400s. European explorers hunting for direct trade routes to Asia accidentally stumbled across the Western Hemisphere. First, it was Norse voyagers like Leif Erikson making temporary landfall in northern coastal pockets. But by 1492, Christopher Columbus's arrival kicked off an unprecedented wave of global invasion. European superpowers, Spain, France, England, the Netherlands, Portugal, scrambled to stake claims on what they arrogantly called the New World. But this contact brought unimaginable devastation. European pathogens like smallpox and measles tore through native populations, killing millions who had zero immune defenses. As the decades rolled on, foreign settlements began to stick. Spain carved out footholds in Florida and the Southwest. The Dutch built a bustling mercantile hub called New Amsterdam on Manhattan Island, which the English later seized and renamed New York. English corporate ventures took root at Jamestown in 1607, driven by high hopes of finding gold, but finding grueling starvation and disease instead. Up north in 1620, religious dissenters known as the Pilgrims landed at Plymouth, drafting the Mayflower Compact, an early, crucial experiment in local self-governance. Over the next century, 13 distinct English colonies grew along the Atlantic coast. They tied themselves directly into a lucrative, deeply inhumane global economic web known as the transatlantic triangle trade. Finished European goods went to Africa. Captured human beings were forced across the Atlantic in horrific conditions to power brutal plantation economies in the Americas, and raw wealth like sugar, tobacco, and timber flowed back to Europe. The arrival of enslaved Africans at Jamestown in 1619 marked the beginning of more than 2 centuries of institutionalized chattel slavery, a fundamental contradiction in a land that would soon preach universal liberty. Meanwhile, Europe's royal rivalries kept spilling over into North America. For almost 100 years, Great Britain and France clashed in a series of brutal proxy wars, dragging their respective Native American allies into the fire. Tensions reached a boiling point in the 1750s over control of the fertile Ohio River Valley. A young, ambitious Virginia militia officer named George Washington accidentally helped spark a global firestorm known as the 7 Years' War, or the French and Indian War in North America. Britain ultimately won, kicking France off the mainland entirely. But winning came with a crushing price tag. Deep in debt, the British Parliament decided its American colonists should help pay for the war that protected them. They slapped down a series of direct taxes, the Stamp Act, the Townshend Acts, the Tea Act. But here's the catch. The colonists had no elected representatives in Parliament. The rallying cry, "No taxation without representation," echoed through city streets. Protests erupted. Secret resistance groups like the Sons of Liberty organized massive boycotts. Tensions turned deadly in 1770 when British soldiers fired into an angry Boston mob, killing 5 citizens in the Boston Massacre. 3 years later, colonists dumped millions of dollars worth of tea into the harbor. London responded with the harsh, intolerable acts, shutting down Boston's port and stripping local rights. Instead of isolating Massachusetts, it united the colonies. Representatives gathered at the Continental Congress. By April 1775, a tense standoff on the Green in Lexington ended with an unknown shot, the shot heard round the world. War was officially on. On July 4, 1776, the Second Continental Congress formally adopted the Declaration of Independence, drafted by Thomas Jefferson. It audaciously asserted that all men are endowed with unalienable rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Against all odds, General George Washington led a ragtag, undersupplied Continental Army through grueling winters at Valley Forge, tactical retreats, and surprise strikes like the crossing of the icy Delaware River. After a critical American victory at Saratoga in 1777, France formally allied with the Americans, supplying vital naval support and troops. Cornered at Yorktown in 1781, British General Cornwallis surrendered. The Treaty of Paris in 1783 officially birthed a brand new sovereign nation. Winning independence was one thing, governing was another. The nation's first government layout, the Articles of Confederation, was deliberately weak because people feared creating another king, but without the power to tax or enforce national laws, the government nearly collapsed during economic panics and armed veteran uprisings like Shays' Rebellion. In 1787, delegates met in Philadelphia to fix the system. Instead, they wrote an entirely new document, the United States Constitution. It engineered a brilliant system of checks and balances across three distinct branches: legislative, executive, and judicial, and added a Bill of Rights to protect individual liberties. George Washington took the oath as the first president, setting lasting precedents like stepping down after 2 terms. As the 19th century dawned, the new republic began expanding at a dizzying pace. In 1803, President Thomas Jefferson bought the vast Louisiana Territory from Napoleon's France, instantly doubling the country's size. Soon after, the United States fought Great Britain again in the War of 1812, defending its maritime sovereignty and proving the young republic was here to stay. Fueling this growth was an ideology known as manifest destiny, the widespread belief that America was divinely ordained to stretch from the Atlantic to the Pacific. Tragically, this expansion came at a crushing cost to indigenous peoples. In 1830, President Andrew Jackson signed the Indian Removal Act. More than 60,000 Native Americans from the Cherokee, Creek, Choctaw, Chickasaw, and Seminole nations were forcibly marched off their ancestral homelands to lands west of the Mississippi River. Thousands perished from exposure, disease, and starvation along the devastating routes known as the Trail of Tears. Meanwhile, settlers surged westward in covered wagons along the Oregon Trail, hunting for land, economic opportunity, or religious freedom, like the Mormons moving to Utah. The discovery of gold at Sutter's Mill in 1848 sparked the massive California gold rush, drawing tens of thousands of 49ers overnight. By 1848, following the Texas Revolution and the Mexican-American War, the United States acquired vast Southwest territories, including present-day California, Nevada, Arizona, and New Mexico. As new territories applied for statehood, one explosive question threatened to tear the country apart. Would these new states allow slavery? For decades, politicians patched over the divide with delicate compromises like the Missouri Compromise of 1820 and the Kansas-Nebraska Act of 1854. But compromise eventually broke down. Violent clashes erupted in Bleeding, Kansas, and radical abolitionist John Brown attempted to spark an armed slave revolt at Harper's Ferry. When anti-slavery Republican Abraham Lincoln won the presidency in 1860, 11 Southern states seceded from the Union to form the Confederacy. In April 1861, Confederate forces opened fire on Fort Sumter in South Carolina. The American Civil War had begun. It was a brutal, industrial-scale conflict that pitted brother against brother. Over 4 long years, massive battles like Gettysburg and Antietam produced staggering casualties. Lincoln issued the Emancipation Proclamation in 1863, transforming the Union cause into an explicit fight to end human slavery. With Northern industrial strength and relentless military campaigns, led by General Ulysses S. Grant, the Union prevailed. Confederate General Robert E. Lee surrendered at Appomattox Courthouse in April 1865. The war saved the Union and led to the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments, which constitutionalized the abolition of slavery, equal protection under the law, and voting rights regardless of race. But the tragic assassination of Lincoln just days after the war ended left the delicate era of Reconstruction in turmoil. White supremacist backlash rapidly instituted oppressive Jim Crow laws across the South, systematically disenfranchising Black Americans for another century. Following the war, the nation sprinted into the Gilded Age, an era of explosive industrialization, massive transcontinental railroads, and rapid urbanization. Industrial tycoons like Rockefeller, Carnegie, and Vanderbilt built colossal monopolies, accumulating unmatched wealth, while millions of factory workers and incoming European immigrants faced grueling hours, low pay, and unsafe conditions in urban slums. Radical labor strikes shook major cities, while muckraking journalists exposed corporate corruption. By the early 1900s, the Progressive Era introduced sweeping government reforms to curb corporate excess, protect consumers, and improve labor conditions. In 1920, decades of tireless organizing by suffragists culminated in the 19th Amendment, granting women the right to vote nationwide. Internationally, America stepped onto the global stage. After a swift victory in the Spanish-American War of 1898 and the construction of the Panama Canal, the U.S. entered World War I in 1917, tipping the scales to secure an Allied victory. The night sky is a canvas painted with stars. Defined by consumer culture, mass-produced automobiles, live radio broadcasts, and the vibrant jazz music of the Harlem Renaissance. But the party came to a crashing halt on Black Thursday in October 1929. The stock market collapsed, triggering the Great Depression. Unprecedented unemployment, bank failures, and ecological disaster in the Dust Bowl left millions destitute. President Franklin D. Roosevelt answered with his transformative New Deal, establishing massive federal work programs, financial regulations, and Social Security to rebuild the American social safety net. World War II completely reshaped everything. Following Japan's surprise attack on Pearl Harbor on December 7, 1941, the United States mobilized its full industrial capacity. American forces fought a two-front war across Europe and the Pacific. Following the successful Allied D-Day invasion in 1944 and the defeat of Nazi Germany, President Harry Truman authorized the use of atomic bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki in August 1945, bringing the war to a decisive end. Out of the ashes of World War II, the United States emerged as a global superpower, locked in an intense ideological standoff with the Soviet Union known as the Cold War. For 4 decades, the two superpowers competed through nuclear arms races, proxy wars in Korea and Vietnam, and an extraordinary space race that landed American astronaut Neil Armstrong on the moon in 1969. Domestically, the post-war era saw the powerful rise of the civil rights movement. Led by figures like Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., Rosa Parks, and countless courageous activists, nonviolent protests, sit-ins, and marches challenged deep-seated racial segregation. Their efforts forced the passage of the landmark Civil Rights Act of 1964 and the Voting Rights Act of 1965. By 1991, the Soviet Union collapsed, leaving the United States as the world's sole superpower. The late 20th and early 21st centuries brought rapid technological revolutions with the birth of the personal computer and the internet, paired with new global challenges, from the devastating September 11 terrorist attacks to economic recessions, political polarization, and a global pandemic. Through 2.5 centuries of war, struggle, profound flaws, and relentless reinvention, the story of the United States remains a compelling, ever-evolving saga. From a collection of fragile coastal settlements to a global powerhouse, it proves that a nation built on an ambitious idea is constantly work in progress, shaped entirely by the people who dare to define its future.